Story 1. This took place a few years ago. I went to see a film with a friend, but due to a slight mix-up, we had accidentally booked to see the film twice. I had booked tickets for Wednesday, and he had booked tickets for Saturday. No problem, we thought. We would watch the film on Wednesday and either give the other booking to our friends or, if the film was good, watch it again. So, off we went on Wednesday. The film was great, and we enjoyed it so much that we decided we would watch it again on Saturday. Saturday arrived, and we met up, had a drink, and then went to watch the film. There weren't many people in the cinema. When we took our seats, there were 3 people in the row in front of us, and some other folks across the aisle who were sitting quite far away. Besides these people in the front row, nobody else was around us. They were chatting through the trailers, which was understandable. Most people watch the trailers and comment, "Oh, that looks great, we should see that." But once the movie certification came on and the screen opened up, it's usually quiet. However, these individuals decided to continue talking rather loudly through the start of the film. They also took selfies, including using the flash who does that. They were generally unpleasant to be around. Both my friend and I politely asked them a few times to be considerate of the other cinema goers, but our requests were ignored. They cheerfully responded that they were enjoying the film in their own way, so we should stop telling them how to watch a movie. I noticed that their behavior was beginning to annoy some of the families across the aisle, which showed just how disruptive they were being. After about 20 minutes of enduring their selfies, videos about how they were finally seeing this film, and overall rudeness, my friend and I decided to fight fire with fire. Since we had already seen the film, we knew all the plot twists. We realized that the people in front of us wanted to enjoy the movie, but at the cost of everyone else's experience. So, we decided to spoil the film for them. We spoke quietly enough so that no one else could hear our conversation, but loud enough that the people in front would. When a character appeared, we discussed how they would die later in the movie. When another character showed up, we mentioned how she betrays someone at the end to save her family. As for the first character, we explained that he had plot protection and would survive to appear in the after-credits scene. After a few of these comments, the group in front realized we were spoiling the movie for them and became very upset. They accused us of ruining the film. We smiled and told them that we were just enjoying the movie in our own way, so they should stop telling us how to watch it. In response, they became even more disruptive and started throwing things around. However, their antics didn't last long, as one of the parents from across the aisle had quietly complained to a staff member. The disruptive group was quickly escorted out of the cinema. My friend and I were not implicated in any way. The staff, recognizing that we had been there earlier in the week, offered us a refund. We declined, but we gladly accepted a free beer instead. Story 2. A couple of years ago, my wife had a blood clot and was rushed to the hospital. Once she was out of danger, but still in the intensive care unit, I went for a walk. I grabbed a tall beer and a pack of cigarettes. Being in Utah, I didn't want to be walking around with an open container, so I waited to open it until I was back on hospital grounds. I went to the very edge of the parking lot, sat on the curb, and opened my beer and lit up. The hospital does provide a valet parking service, but I was far from that area. A couple from the baby boomer generation pulled up and stopped. The windows rolled down, and this exchange took place. Them, "We're in a hurry." Me, "Okay." Them, "We need you to return to the valet and park our car." Me, drinking a beer and smoking a cigarette, I don't work here." Them, "Sir, you parked our car for us last time we were here. Now please return to the valet podium and park our car." Me, I'm 55, salt and pepper hair, unshaven, wearing a cap, sunglasses, t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops that I just threw on to follow the ambulance. And I've only seen much younger guys running the valet. I really don't think you want me parking your car. And like I said, I don't work here. Them, "We'd recommend you get up and return to the podium immediately and park our car. We're in a hurry. If not, We'll make sure you're fired. Me. The stress of the last 18 hours hit. Why don't you go bother someone else? Them. Excuse me. Me. You heard me. Go bother someone else. Them. The man slams the truck into neutral and exits. Wife. You better watch your mouth, young man. Me stands up. As the man comes around the back of the vehicle, I set my beer down, take a drag from the cigarette, and flick the butt in his general direction. My wife is upstairs in the intensive care unit. I've had a pretty stressful night and day. I was hoping to have a beer and a smoke and recenter myself so I can go be supportive to her. You've completely ruined that. So the next best thing is going to be releasing my frustration physically. It's been some time since I was in a fight, but the more I think about it, the more I believe it's exactly what I need. Let's go. Them. He stops in his tracks, trying as hard as he can to retreat but not to seem weak. Wife. We're going straight to security. You're getting fired and arrested. They tried to squeal the tires and leave, but whatever their low-quality truck was, it didn't have enough power for that. I walked over to where my cigarette butt landed, picked it up, and went back to the curb. Never heard from nor seen anyone from security, and I gave the valet guy a nice wave as I passed by, going back into the hospital. Story 3. Just a quick history to set the stage. At a younger age, I moved from Chicago to Baltimore to take a job with the federal government. When I started, I hit it off with a couple of guys, who've since become my best friends. We all lived together for about 5 years until one by one we started moving on, getting married, etc. One guy, we'll call him John, left our place of employment to take a job as a Secret Service agent. As everyone went their separate ways, I thought I'd make a smart decision as a young professional and buy a house. In 27, right before the financial collapse. Needless to say, immediately after buying, I was upside down big time and struggling. I had some other co-workers move in, but they only lasted about a year before abruptly moving out, leaving me scrambling to find a roommate, and thus setting the stage for my revenge story. I ended up posting on a bunch of venues to find the new roommate. One guy ended up far and above the best option. We'll call him Russell. Russell was a military veteran who had served a couple tours in combat zones and was now a sous chef at a local restaurant. He was easy to get along with, so I pulled the trigger in haste without doing the proper checks I should have, primarily due to being in a desperate financial situation. The first sign something was off was when Russell moved in. He came with just a couple boxes and a TV. No bed, furniture, etc. The next clue came from me chatting him up about his time in the military. On the surface he could talk the talk, but as I got more nuanced, his answers became more, well, wrong. He claimed to be a former Ranger, so he would have known the topics discussed. The final clue was the classic one. He started making excuses for rent payment on month 2. By this time I knew something was not right, so I politely told Russell to move out, which he did immediately. Once gone, I went to Home Depot to buy new locks, and much to my surprise my debit card didn't work. Come to find out, Russell had stolen a checkbook and cleaned me out. Every cent I had in my account was gone. At this time, I'm feeling a mixture of anger, fear of not being able to pay my mortgage, and disappointment in myself for not vetting him properly. When I ended up telling John, he was livid. He wanted every detail about the situation. Little did I know, John told all his co-workers, and they immediately opened a case on Russell. For those of you who don't know, the Secret Service also deals with financial economic crimes, albeit normally on a much larger scale than my savings account. Within a few days, Secret Service agents had tracked down and arrested all the individuals who had cashed the fake checks on Russell's behalf. One turned and advised Russell would be at the troublemaker's last resort at the Baltimore Inner Harbor that night. John and his crew changed into plain clothes and went there to wait. Lo and behold, Russell shows up and acts like he owns the place. He started announcing that he was leaving on a deployment to Iraq, so he wanted to buy the entire bar a drink with my money, I should add. As he was standing there paying for everyone's drinks, John stood up and shouted, "Secret Service, you're under arrest." 3 agents slammed him down, cuffed him, and pulled him out where 2 black sport utility vehicles rolled up on the boardwalk to take him away. My other friend who had gone to observe said the entire restaurant paused in stunned silence for about 30 seconds. They take Russell in, and by this time John says he's crying his eyes out. The best part of the ordeal was John made him add in his written confession, "I routinely pretend to be an Army Ranger, but have never served." Before being taken to the city jail, Russell asked John, "Why did the Secret Service arrest me?" To which John replied, "You robbed the wrong guy." Epilogue: the bank ended up giving me all my money back very quickly under a fraud claim. I ended up attending Russell's court appearance with John, where he took a plea and spent 6 months behind bars. Needless to say, I was a bit more careful in choosing my next roommate, who ended up being my wife, and we've been happily married for 5 years. Edit: I see a lot of comments about skepticism of how Russell was federally charged. I reached out to John, and he advised they charged him on the state level due to the low scale of the crime, which explains why he went to city jail, and why I attended city court. I did a quick search and found this since I know you'll ask. Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 13 allows for federal agencies to charge for state offenses, which would be offenses under state law in which federal territory resides. Story 4. This happened to me in 2013. I was over 30, had gone back to school, and it was the Friday before finals week of my last semester to finish my CE degree. Bordering around campus, it's rather low income and not highly educated, and not a place I frequented. I walked into a gas station, we'll call it Square L, about 7:30 a.m. Locally, that's 30 minutes after they start selling alcohol. County is dry between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. Grab 2 of the largest packs of cheap beer they sell and head up to the register. No big deal, just stocking up for a small study party with friends on campus later that day. The person behind the register eyes me suspiciously as I set them on the counter and tells me I'm not buying them. I politely explained it's after 7 and I don't see a problem. The manager, denoted by dress shirt instead of polo, leans over and tells her to get my ID, so she asks me for it. I'm like, fine, whatever, and I fidget around a minute before realizing it's in my car. I said as much and offered to grab it, and she told me to go ahead. I dash out to my car, grab my wallet from my book bag. No big deal. Walk back in and present it to the person at the register, who promptly glances at it, snickers, snaps it in half, tosses it in the trash, and tells me to get the heck out of her store. I stood there a minute, sort of dumbfounded. The manager tells me to get the heck out of the store or the police will be called and someone is getting arrested. I mumbled something along the lines of "oh crap," and opted to comply with the second half. I went to my car, grabbed my phone, called non-emergency, and told them I just had my driver's license taken and destroyed, read off the address, ended my call, then headed back inside and stood. The manager tells me that's it, they are calling the cops. I let her know I already did. The clerk laughs and shouts for the people in the store to hear, "Y'all want to stick around. This punk called the cops on us for taking their fake ID." It took about 10 minutes, but they showed up. As they arrived, the manager rushed out the door, and I walked behind. The cop asked for me immediately by name, dismissing the manager pointing at me and rattling off about my fake ID. I told him what happened, and I was told to leave or cops were to be called and someone was to be arrested. He then takes the statement from the manager, then the clerk, then requests the ID be retrieved from the trash. He looks it over and hands the 2 pieces back to me. He hasn't said anything other than simple requests for info up to this point, then asks me to come along and we're gonna have a chat outside. At this point, I'm actually growing a bit concerned. He punches in the DL number, and up pops my face and info. Clean history both driving and criminal. He then lets me know that destruction of a license is a misdemeanor in this state, and asks which one snapped it. We have a brief conversation, and at this point, he's smiling ear to ear. He asks me if I want to press charges, and at this point, I've already missed first class, so state I do. I'm told to play along with him, and we share a course of action. By this time, there were 4 squad cars and police milling about. Customers had grown scared. We walked back in. I'm staring at the floor looking pensive, and he says loudly, "What do we say?" and nudges me. I politely say, "I'm very sorry this happened, and I'm sure it won't happen again." The clerk and manager begin chuckling. I then finish with, "The manager requested the clerk take it, who snapped it. Then the manager is the one who said someone is getting arrested." The officer undid the cuffs from his belt, walked up to the clerk, and began with Miranda rights. Another did the same to the manager. Another 30 minutes roll by while they are sitting in the backs of squad cars. The store is devoid of employees until someone walks out from the back cooler. I wait patiently. Eventually, they are cut loose under own recognizance, and I'm given a date to play witness in court. We head back in, and the manager is irate. The employee, on release, bolted. I pay for my now warm beer and leave. My professor got a great laugh out of the police report and let me do my project presentation late anyway. Edit. As for the court date, one of them pushed it further, so it turned into 2 dates. As the witness, I showed up, but wasn't really needed. The first pleaded no contest to a charge for destruction of state property, got 6 months probation and 1,000 hours of community service, as well as having to write me an apology. The other ended up pleading guilty to an obstruction charge and got 6 months probation only. Edit 2. For those who say 1,000 isn't possible, it started as probation and 100 hours for the first person who pleaded no contest. They spoke out against the judge. He upped it to 200, then 500, then 1,000. Kid kept mouthing off, and I remember there was a string of other offenses on their record. The manager had only had a previous possession charge, but on his date, acted humble and polite in court, the total opposite of how they had in the store with the cops. Edit 4. I never did get the apology letter. If it was written and turned in, I have no idea where it went. Edit 5. For perspective on how this county does things, I, myself, received 200 hours and 6 months probation for getting caught stealing a pack of cigarettes. When I was 19, we were all young and dumb once, and they didn't used to hide behind the registers everywhere, which I served in about 50 hours picking up trash. Then the guy signed off on the whole time, so I doubt they'd have had to actually serve the whole thing. Story 5. Background. I joined this Japanese-based company a few years ago as a production assistant. I wasn't assisting anyone in production. I was the only American and the only one fully fluent in both languages. Still looking for a better line of work, so I ended up helping everyone else in some fashion or another. Well, I also had to do my own work, of course, but when things shipped behind schedule, it was made out to be my fault. I helped our shipping manager send things out and receive them, count, quality check them, weigh the boxes, palletize them, etc. Our sales manager, the man himself in question, constantly asked me to double-check his emails so he sounded more natural and professional, and even had me get involved on numerous occasions to help him save face or placate customers. Event. From the time that I started, we'd been struggling to keep time because of inventory issues. These issues were both because our customer didn't keep accurate numbers, and neither did we, not just for the parts they sent us for assembly, but also for the boxes we used to package the order before shipping. Boxes I used, and only I used. Boxes I was not allowed to order, but had to ask Mr. Sales Manager to order for me. Well, he would forget to order them, and then I'd remind him, and he'd forget again, only ordering days later. It happened enough times that our customer finally demanded we count up our inventory. I made an Excel sheet, made it legible in both English and Japanese, color-coded areas of concern, and I also added everything we used in the office, from boxes only used by shipping to gloves to the parts from our biggest customer, as they were demanding we count. Everything got counted, everything was put in that document, and I made sure to include a field of when it was last counted. Result. Suddenly we're making good time and getting ahead, and I don't have to worry about boxes. Now, this entire time, Mr. Sales was working on a 20-page document that proved our president didn't do his job, trying to report him to the Japanese Home Office and get him fired. My two coworkers got a glimpse of it and saw there were sections on all of us too, bad-mouthing our work, trying to make it seem like only Mr. Sales was on the up and up. Finally, the Japanese parent company sends someone. This guy is unknown to all of us, the son-in-law of the company owner of a family-owned and run company, pretty common in Japan. Well, only I and our shipping manager learn of this, since we actually talked to the guy. But Mr. Sales likes to treat him like a goof and poke fun at him. This guy sent to us from Japan carefully plans meetings with us for while Mr. Sales is out of the office and interviews all of us about what's been up at our USA branch. Our late shipments come up, and my pattern of shipping late and insulting our biggest customer with my laziness. There are also reports of me being on my phone too much, preoccupied watching videos or listening to music and not working. I start pulling out the emails and the inventory I was told to create. I show him the inventory history and my emails asking for Mr. Sales to do his job from before it was made. I show him the ship dates and the differences before and after I made the inventory file. Fallout. A friend of mine in Japan is experiencing severe mental distress, and I'd lost contact with him a few times. I decide to go to Japan and help him out, try to live there, but at best I have 6 months of savings. That means I have to leave the company. I know this guy from Japan is going to arrive and all Mr. Sales' delusions of being USA branch president will die. But I couldn't be there to see it. So I went to Japan, spent my 6 months successfully. Friend re-entered college to chase his dreams instead of being a disheartened salaryman. He's on the mend and returned to the US a few months ago. I get in contact with the company and they rehire me. Now that I'm here, I learned Mr. Sales quit shortly after I left, but not before he aired every last thing he had told me would stay between us and leave all but a literal mess on my desk. I checked my old inventory file. He zeroed it out. The company has been shipping late again. Hired a new guy to do my job that's been getting parts returned to fix errors numerous times, something that only happened to me once. Do they want me to fix any of that? No. Here's a book of local businesses. Call them, drum up customers. Oh, okay, can do. Thanks for the paycheck for doing something so easy that won't ever work, I guess. Story 6. Years ago, shortly after I had left the service, my girlfriend, now wife, and I moved in together, halfway across the United States from both of our respective families. Long stories for another time, and to a place where we both had friends as a result of our military travels. One of my wife's friends, we'll call her Anna, had gotten married in the intervening years since they had last been together and was in the process of a divorce since her husband had impregnated the checkout girl at the local orchard. She had left the home, a single wide trailer, important later they owned, left the car they owned which she had solely paid for, and was still in her name, moved back in with her parents, and got a second job. She already worked at a large big box retail establishment. Of course, my wife and I commiserate with her on multiple occasions about how poorly she had been treated. Anna made a remark at one point about missing her bills that month. My wife asked, "What bills? You live with your parents, you have 2 jobs, no credit cards, and you never do anything expensive. What could you possibly owe anyone money for?" It turns out that she still had a checking account linked to her ex-husband's account, and when he decided not to pay the mortgage or the car payment, they simply took it out of her account, marked the loan current, and went on with their lives. Shortly after the divorce, he would make most payments, but for the last year or so, he hasn't made a single one. So ex-hubby has perfect credit because he never misses a payment, and Anna's credit is in shambles because she is constantly late on her own bills. Anna may have 2 jobs, and not a lot of bills: cell phone, car payment, insurance. When she's making someone else's mortgage and car payments as well, she's pretty much broke, and that's why she never does anything expensive, and has to have me change her oil in my gravel driveway because she can't afford $20 for Jiffy Lube. I asked her why she didn't close the accounts and go somewhere else. Anna's answer: "But if they miss their payments, the bank will take their house and their car, and they have a baby. I can't do that to them." I did the Forrest Whitaker eye. Then I said, "They're taking advantage of you pretty badly. They've established that you'll pay all their bills for them, and they can do whatever they want, because you'll never force the sale of the house or the car. If I had an option to pay my bills, or pass it off to someone I don't like, I'd let them do it every time. He's paying an electric bill and getting a free house, car, and everything else. And I guarantee you that he's handing these bills to the social worker and claiming he can't afford to live, so they'll give him women, infants, and children WIC, food stamps, and everything else. You're funding the lifestyle of a jerk who cheated on you, and a woman who knew he was married, etc. You see, I may not give a rip about most of the people I know, but you do not mess with my close friends." She gives it some thought, and a couple of days later asks for some help out of this. I took her to my bank to get an account the next day. She moves her direct deposit, withdraws her money, and closes her old account. The next month, ex-hubby's bills don't get paid. We're watching a movie when he calls. She spends an hour in a screaming match with him, telling him to pay his own bills. She has been charitable enough, and he and his new wife can pay for their own belongings. Then the penny drops. Remember earlier when I said the house was a trailer? Anna has been paying the mortgage on the trailer, but not the rent for the lot it's on. They never had her checking account. This entitled person has been assuming she's been paying that too. She assumed he had. He hasn't even figured out what's coming yet. He's calling because he's mad she hasn't paid the lot rent in forever, and he's being told to pay up, move his trailer, or they'll do it and hold the trailer in arrears until the bill for moving it is paid. He's calling to ask her for another $6,000, or they'll lose the home they both loved so much. Now, up until this moment, Anna had been this sweet, wonderful gumdrop of a person. The type of person that it should be legal to slap if they're encountered before 9 a.m. The relentlessly sunny person that you send into the room to cheer up Tinkerbell. For the better part of a year, I haven't heard this woman say a bad thing about anybody. Until tonight. Until this guy called to complain that she hadn't been paying enough of his bills. And she loses her mind. She lights into this guy that he'd better figure it out, because he's not getting another penny from her ever again. And while he's figuring out who to beg, borrow, or steal that money from, he may want to get a little extra since he's about to get the overdue notices for the house and the car too. He starts screaming so loud, I can clearly hear what he's calling her from across the room before she calmly hits the end button, flips the phone over, pops the battery out, sets them both down on my table, hits play on the video cassette recorder VCR, morphs back into her normally sunny self, and offers to make popcorn. Monday morning, she went to the lawyer, filed a no-contact order, filed for bankruptcy. Her credit was already a mess. There were bills her name was on, and she didn't want that splatter all over her, and called the dealer that owned her car note, told her she couldn't make the payments anymore, and offers them a voluntary repossession, has them bring out their tow truck, and meets the driver with the keys and the paperwork, signs the forms, asks the driver oh so sweetly to drop her off at her parents' house on the way back to the dealer, and waves at her ex from the passenger seat of the tow truck as he comes running out of the trailer wearing only a towel. Over the course of the next month or two, he lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. His wife had to go back to weighing pears at the orchard. Turns out she'd left her job when Anna was paying for everything, and sell his record collection, which was what he'd been spending his money on while someone else was paying for everything. On the bright side, I picked up original vinyl copies of Abbey Road and Yellow Submarine for a total of $5 because his clueless wife running their yard sale didn't understand why the old, crappy records were worth anything anyway. And that's how Tinkerbell burned some entitled person's life to the ground. Story 7. This one isn't super long or super bombastic or super humorous, more just strange and sad. In middle school, I went to a school that was known for being rather large and rather terrible. A lot of the kids were wannabe gangsters, and a lot of the teachers were there to power trip. Anyhow, there was this one kid who the teachers either really hated or really liked. His name was Andy, and he had Down syndrome. Andy and I got along, but we weren't best friends or anything. Andy was brutally honest, and it really wasn't to be mean. A lot of the teachers thought he did it to talk back and seem cool in front of us other kids. But to be honest, a lot of kids didn't like him either, because he was just as honest with them. There was this one dude, Trey, who was just a pain. Trey stabbed me with a small object in a locker room for my wallet and was also my bisexual awakening, but that's a different story. Trey picked fights with anyone and everyone, and if he didn't win, he would do a lot of pouting and crying. Trey picks a fight with Andy one day, but he didn't touch him, because Andy basically just tore him up and down, verbally, in front of all Trey's friends. Andy tells Trey that everyone knows he's got a bad home life, that he whines when he doesn't get his way, that we're all annoyed by him, that his up-and-coming rap career is never gonna take off, and that we all know his dad isn't some entrepreneur, off on business in another state. Trey threatened to hit Andy, but Andy said, "You hit a disabled kid for seemingly no reason. We both know you're expelled, which is not what your mom needs right now." To be honest, I kinda felt bad, but I'd felt much worse if Trey hadn't literally stabbed me earlier that year, and hurt several of my friends, as well as just be a bully. Looking back, I feel a lot worse for Trey, but in that moment, watching his eyes well up with tears while his friends all laughed and cheered Andy on, I was like, karma. Well, a few days later, Trey's mom comes to school angry as heck. Turns out, Trey told some staff that Andy called him a racial slur, which didn't happen, and no one believed him. The teachers who did believe him didn't care. Trey told his mom, and she was more than happy to come and scold some disabled kid. Guess she didn't have anything better to do. She barges in halfway through physical education, asks a sheepish Trey to point out which kid did it, and despite the physical education teacher's feeble, "Hey, I don't think you're supposed to be here," she stomped right up to Andy and just started screaming at him, calling this 12-year-old disabled kid a racist, ableist, which we didn't even know the meaning of yet, among other things, and it became apparent real quick that Trey embellished the story a little. So here this angry woman is screaming at a Down syndrome kid half her size, swinging her press-on nails around like she was gonna Freddy Krueger this fool, and Andy gets a grossed out look on his face. This dumbfounded woman stops to be like, "What?" And Andy just pinches his nose and goes, "P.U., ma'am, you smell." Which, to be fair, she did. A bunch of us could smell her over our own pungent protein odor. Trey's mom just stopped, completely. Her entire demeanor changed instantly. She just kind of deflated a little. I don't know what it was about that comment, but it caused a very obvious momentary slip. She quickly tried to regain control over the situation, but everyone saw her uncertainty, and 12, 13-year-olds are brutal when they smell fear. Like sharks. She tried for another moment to chew Andy out, but we all started whispering to each other, and Andy started picking his nose, which I'm certain was the point that she realized. I'm in a public school, yelling at a 13-year-old boy with an obvious disability, and my actions may have consequences. This is not smart of me. So she just kind of turned and began marching back to the exit with fake confidence like, "Yeah, I made my point. I'm going to leave now." As she passed me, my foolish self stopped her and said, "Ma'am, Trey stabbed me with a pocket knife 4 weeks ago," and showed her a healing gash on my forearm. Her eyes widened and she said, I don't wanna," before just covering her face and leaving. Never saw or heard from her again. Trey was still a troublemaker, but he did not mess with disabled kids anymore physically, for the most part, which luckily included me. Score. But yeah, not really any closure, just a really hectic and entertaining 5 minutes or so in the middle of gym on a random Tuesday.